Today, I want to talk to y'all about something that I feel like I've been experiencing so much in life right now. And a lot of podcasters call this the lonely chapter of your life, or what I think is more of a biblical way of viewing it is the wilderness wanderings. And one thing that I feel like, not just personally, but even in some conversations, um, I've been thinking about how do you overcome or how you endure these wilderness wanderings? How do you stay full of life and joy and hopefulness in the midst of the wilderness wanderings? And this right now, it's really applying to me in my personal life, but also in my business life. I feel like we're somewhere that I want to take this business and I want to take our life somewhere that is beyond what I've seen possible in my life. And so it's just this middle ground in your life where you want to be better than you're at. But if you go back to your current friends, they don't really understand what that looks like. And I do have a lot of friends of mine who are kind of in that same place, and we've been having these conversations, which is great when you have a community. But there's also this other part that you haven't really been putting yourself, or you're not in the circles that you should be to aspire to keep going further or to keep pushing or to give you the knowledge that you don't have. And so I find myself in that middle ground right now, but more in the tail end of it. And I feel like I've been there for almost 10 years, if I could be honest. So this is what I put together on this idea, which is overcoming the wilderness wanderings. So to me, what I think I've found is that the wilderness in your life comes about after you choose to follow a calling or a purpose or a promise. Like I said, we see this in the Bible primarily with Moses when he chooses to go and get the Israelites and go before Pharaoh and be like, let my people go. He is entering into a promise with God and saying, okay, God, I believe that you want the promised land for me, and I believe that you want these things for me. So then I'm going to act out of that faith. We also see this with Jesus when Jesus gets baptized and it said, this is my one and only son. That is now setting Jesus up for his wilderness with Satan and going into that battle. And so what we see is at both times there is this identity given to the person, but then there is also this living out of what that identity looks like. And so when we get into the wilderness of our lives, I think it's so much happens because we're choosing to do something that we haven't done before. There is something in our life that provokes us to want better and to say, okay, enough is enough, right? For Christians and for people who believe in the Bible, it may be something like a calling from God, something that calls us to adventure and to wonder. And for other people, it could just really be like, I'm not happy in this place. I'm not happy in this relationship. I'm not happy with my weight. I'm not happy with my finances. It's this push to uneasiness, right? Like you want something better and you don't know what that better looks like, but you just know that you're not happy where you're at. And so in the beginning, you need this revelation or this calling or this promise to hold on to say, like, okay, I want something better. What is that better? So to me, it's the promise of God over your life. That is what causes you to go onto this adventure and onto this path to become the person that you're meant to be. So once you have that, right, whatever that promise is, then that is kind of what takes you into the wilderness because you're like, okay, now that I know this, now that I've been given this revelation, I need to go and put it to action. I need to go and see if it's true. Um, and I think that's where the wilderness happens because a lot of people are not willing to kind of go on that adventure. There are a lot of people out there who may get the calling, who may get the angst or the anxiety or the depression or something to say, I'm not happy here. And then that's where it stops. Well, there's a lot of people who say, well, I'm just going to stay in this unhappiness. I'm going to stay in this uneasiness and I'm not going to progress from that. But then there's people who say, okay, so how do I get out of there? Well, so much so, when you're in that place, a lot of people don't want to go on that journey with you. And so when you're in that journey, you're alone. Again, you see that with Moses, you see that with Jesus. Like Moses ends up killing a person, and then flees to the wilderness, and then is there by himself and has this encounter with God. And so it started off only by himself for a while. Same thing with Jesus. Jesus started off in the wilderness by himself for a while. And so what I think ends up happening in our lonely places in our life is there's things that we're meant to learn that we will then later need to exercise. And so in the wilderness, there comes this realization that you need to go back to the basics. Like, what is it that got you here, right? You need to remember, okay, it's the uneasiness, okay, it's me wanting better. That's what got me here, right? But not just that, you need to go back to what you know. So that's what I mean by back to the basics, like going back to what you know. For me, it was that call to adventure. What I know is that I'm not happy here anymore. But what I also know is that the things that I've been doing is kind of what got me here, right? Like, I wasn't the best person. I wasn't the best business person. I wasn't the best with finances. I wasn't this, and that. So my bad choices is what got me to the place that I didn't like, but also the place that I didn't like got me to the place where I want to be, or it's what's going to get me to the place where I want to be. So there needs to be something there that is building me up to become the person that I'm meant to be. And what I think that is, and especially in the life of like a Christian or a believer, is faithfulness in God. And so when you're put in a place of realization, that's what I'm calling it, you end up realizing, oh, every single time I've trusted in God and trusted in His promises, He's come through in some way, shape, or form, or I've learned a lesson that's made me better. So faith has been this muscle I've been exercising throughout this entire time. Okay, what does that look like in this area, right? What ends up happening in this point of realization, and I'm reminded of when Jesus is telling his disciples about, you can't have new wine in old wineskins because the wine's going to burst. I think there's a lot in that parable, but one of the things that I think applies to business, personal life, and just to like living a successful life is your old way of thinking cannot be contained in your new life, right? If you want new life, you need new way of thinking. And as your thinking progresses, your life should also progress with it, because the old cannot contain the new. The new is going to either overconsume the old, and that's kind of what he says, right? Like, it's either going to bust the wineskins and now you're wasting the wine, or you just won't do it because you're like, well, I don't want to risk it, you know what I mean? And so what we can learn from that is, while we're in the wilderness, sometimes we want to overthink things like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do that to get to where I need to go. But I think so often is just going back to the basics and realizing, like, my old way of thinking needs to change into these new environments, right? You need to adapt. And so, again, when Jesus was in the wilderness, and Satan is over here like testing him, Jesus is still going to the Old Testament, but he's pulling out this new unfound wisdom that was not there, that was not realized. He is then showing us, like, this is the truth, this is where it never goes dry. When we see that in our personal lives, again, if you're not a Christian, you're not a believer, the way that you need to look at this is saying, okay, these old habits, right? Whether it's bad relationship, bad finances, showing up to work late, talking back to your boss, whatever it is, these old mindsets is pretty much what got you where you got to the place of unhappiness, uneasiness, and a place that you didn't like anymore. So, what you need to realize, that new thought of, I can't keep doing this, let me try something different, that is something that's actually going to help you progress throughout life, right? When you're in so many situations, you need to realize, rather than just feeling uneasy and not wanting to speak up or not wanting to change and just dealing with it, you could then take the action to say, okay, then what can I do to change this? It may not be a big change, it may be a little change, right? Like, if your boss tells you to do something, you're the kind of person who's more combatant, hey, try doing what he or she says at one point and seeing how that changes the relationship dynamic. If it's for the better, well, then try doing a little bit more and seeing where that takes you, right? Then you get employee of the month, then you get, employee of the year, then you end up running a branch of a company, then you, right? Like, there's so many things that little actions can do that will have a big impact. But you need this new way of thinking to say, no, it isn't going to be like it was again because I'm a new person now. And so I'm going to try this newness on with every decision and be willing to grow and expand. And so we have the revelation, all right, so which I'm saying is God's promise, his calling on your life. Or again, if you're not a Christian, you don't believe in this, just the sense of uneasiness, unhappiness, depression, right? I know for me, in my lowest point of life is when I was willing to try the hardest, right? It was when I was the most depressed, the most suicidal, um, the most unhappy, when I had nothing going for me and I had nothing to lose. That's when I was like, well, then whatever I decide next, it's up, right? Like, if I'm already at rock bottom, then whatever my next decision is can only be better than the one I've been making. And so then my next decision was I'm moving to Austin. I'm going to pursue coffee roasting. Right? I'm going to be married to this woman. And it's funny because I thought that was my decision, but my decision was also based off of what I said, God's calling and God's promise. Because there was a lot of people in my life at that time who were saying, you need to move to Austin. God is telling me that you need to move to Austin. God's telling me that your wife is in Austin. I heard that over and over again by, I would say, about 5 or 10 friends. And this is one of those other things that you need to realize is that sometimes other people may see a potential in you that you don't see in yourself. And so God's calling and promise in your life may come through another voice and maybe even a voice that you don't expect. So be open to hearing out people, because at this point in my life when people were saying that to me, I thought they were just saying it out of pity. Like, dude, you're not happy in Brownsville, you got to move. But everybody would say, and again, even people who weren't Christians at the time were saying, like, you just need to move to Austin. I feel like that's where you're going to thrive. I feel like that's where you need to be. Fast forward, I listened to that, moved to Austin. Within a year, I become a coffee roaster. Within a year, I started dating the girl who I will soon marry, and she will become the mother of my two awesome kids. And I'm now in a place where I'm going back to the basics, right? I'm realizing, hey, this faithfulness, this clinging to God in the hard times, this hopefulness for good is what got you here. Like, whatever your circumstances look like, business wise and financially wise and spiritually wise and this and this and that, like, go back to the basics. What got you here? What were the habits that you started putting into place that end up compiling to one success after the other, after the other, after the other? And it was really just knowing that when God calls me to adventure, it isn't it isn't a dead promise. Like, something good and something fun and something scary is going to come out of it. But I know that at the end of the day, it's for my good. It's for my embetterment. And so now we're going to our last point, which is redemption. This is primarily built on our relationship with God. His past faithfulness reminds us in our present suffering of our future hope that is before us, which is God keeping his promises. And so now I'm in a point where I'm like, okay, I feel like God is calling me to something really big, really scary, and really fun. I don't know what that looks like, but what I do know is he will keep his word. So I just need to go back to the basics and trust in him with every phone call to a client, with every photo and video shoot that I'm on, with every hand that I shake, with every opportunity I get in front of the camera. Like, just do your best and God will take care of the rest, right? That the old saying. And that's kind of where I'm at in life, is this very simple obedience, right? Even like in my own business, one of the things that got us to be where we're at now and just having a good reputation with a lot of clients in this town is just going back to the basics, being presentable, being kind and nice, being on time, giving a good product, and saying and doing what we say we're going to do. Like, that's what's made us a good and successful business to work with. And it's just the basic things, right? But on top of that, I like to build, hey, hiring other editors, working with other photographers, doing other things, right? Taking on different kinds of works and different kind of clients. But at the base of all of it is just basic, good old business, and that's it. And so the redemption part of this ends up being letting God flex, right? Letting God show off and say, I told you so. And that's kind of what I'm eager for. Like, I don't know where our business is going to go in the next 6 months to a year, and I don't know where I'm going to be in the next 6 months to a year. But I do know that God is saying it's going to be something fun, adventurous, and scary. And have I ever not made it so, right? In the last 10 years of being in this relationship with him, like these constant tests that he's been giving me of just like, trust me, just trust me, trust me. Whether it was pursuing coffee roasting and saying like, okay, I'm going all in on coffee roasting, and that's going to be my thing, and that's the thing I'm going to be known for. To then being like, okay, take a leap in this relationship. All right, this is going to be the girl, and this is who I'm going to double down on. Take a chance on photography and videography. It's like, okay, I'm gonna, right. And so whenever God does do that, I feel like it ends up being better than I expected. And so what I'm waiting for is just that redemption of God saying like, I told you so. I told you it was going to be fun, and I told you you're going to be better at the end of it. um and I think that applies so much for business, like these very easy practices to overcoming the wilderness, right? You remember like, I'm here because I was unhappy being over there. Then you end up realizing, hey, it's actually much simpler than it seems, right? One of my favorite stories that I like to tell people is like, Michael Jordan would always go back to North Carolina and practice the basics after the playoffs, right? He would go, teach me how to pass, teach me how to shoot, teach me jump shots, teach me defense, teach me this, teach me that, because the basics is what wins championships. And so don't overthink it, right? In your business, sometimes it really just is as simple as being a good customer to work with, getting referrals, having a good client base, being on time, right? All these kind of things just seem so simple, but they all work. And at the end of the day, they work because the return of investment on them. You know that because you're doing these things, this is why you're having a good client, a good, rotating door with clients. And I feel like, again, these very spiritual principles, that I love learning from the Bible, being in this wilderness and seeing how not just people in the Old Testament and not just individuals, but even tribes in the Old Testament wandered together and enjoyed the meaning of success together, right? They entered the promised land together. You even see that with Jesus, right? He was in the wilderness by himself, but then he goes with the disciples, and then he feeds the 5,000 and all this great stuff. And so there's times where God calls you to a wilderness to experience on your own, to get you ready to then teach that corporately, to say, hey, like when I went through this, these are the things that kept me solid. So here are these principles that we could live by that are going to make us successful as a people. And so I think if we stick to those, we will be a successful people. Catch you on the next one. Peace out.